Hello and welcome to the Rest is Entertainment Questions Edition with me, Marina Hyde.
And me, Richard Osborne, Question and Answers Edition. You're very, very welcome.
You're most welcome. Right.
One day we'll just do Questions Edition, which is just people's questions, and we'll see how you like it.
Yeah. Fine. I'm going to hit you with our first question.
Do you need an answer or...?
Right. I'm out of here if this carries on. I'm out of here. Right. It is... We did issue a please give us this question plea.
Yes, a come and get me plea.
A come and get me plea. Come and question us plea. Which was, could people ask us about our top 3 Spielberg movies?
Yes, I can't remember why we issued that plea. I know it's for a good reason.
I think we just wanted to say what our top 3 Spielberg movies. I think it was probably that simple, wasn't it?
Okay,
I mean, I would have thought.
That makes sense.
And also, it's a hard one, very hard one to do.
It's a really hard one to do, but this is where the whole answers thing comes into this podcast. This is the beauty of it.
Oh my God, I hadn't thought of it.
Is that people might actually need an answer. We also said, by the way, because we were fairly open in asking people to send it to us, they said, if you've got a good name, we are more likely to read yours out. You know, even make something up or the name of a celebrity. We got an awful lot of people asking this.
Yeah.
Some people did not get this memo. I just a shout out to both Dan Smith and Gary Wilson to say, if we're asking for this question and we're saying, please give us a name that's going to be interesting to read out. Dan, God love you. I mean, it's your parents more than anything. God love you, but Dan Smith is not, we're not going to be able to have a lot of fun with it. And Gary Wilson, there's a snooker player called Gary Wilson, but
when isn't there? When isn't there?
But that is not going to cut the mustard. We're not going to do a tight 5 on Dan Smith, although we just have. But the person whose name we've chosen, of course, the question we've chosen, Dan and Gary, take notes. Max Spielberg, apparently not related but often mistaken, says Max Spielberg. So I think maybe it's his real name. Max's question,
yes,
is
what a run up.
Yeah, he's absolutely gone route one as well. What are your top 3 Steven Spielberg films? Thank you, Max. It's a good question, isn't it?
Okay, I cannot believe.
Should we do 3, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1?
Yes,
how about
you tell
that
me how to do
formats?
it because I think we both know this isn't my strong suit.
But because we
the structuring
everyone's
of
got
the
strong
replies.
opinions.
It pains me to leave out Close Encounters, but this is, I mean, it pains me to leave out all sorts of things.
Yes.
But it pays me to leave out Duel. It pays me to leave out Schindler's List. But
it's one of the few directors you could do a top 10 of and not ever run out of quality.
Anything.
Yeah.
I'm putting Jaws at 3.
Oh, whoa. Excuse me. Wow. Okay, let me hold on to my... Wow, you didn't expect that, Max Spielberg, did you? Jaws at 3. That's interesting.
Well,
Any reason or
it's really hard for me not to put... I knew you'd absolutely lose your mind if I said I want to put them all equal number 1.
Of course you can't put it equal number 1.
No, I know. So I knew you'd lose your mind. So, okay, Jaws is at 3.
Why don't you marry 3 people?
Right.
Why don't you do that? Why don't you say to your husband...
Maybe I have.
Do you know what?
Maybe I have.
Maybe I
Breaking.
have.
Okay.
So, okay, you've gone Jaws at 3. My number 3, you just mentioned it, I've gone Duel. Just because it was such an explosion on the screen, and you just think, oh, wow, here's
an explosion on the small screen first. It's a TV movie first.
Yes, it's a TV movie, exactly. Yeah. But you just think, somebody who comes along, people often say, what is it that directors do? Isn't it all script? Isn't it all actors? And, Duel shows you what a director does. Someone who just takes a simple idea and just makes it look extraordinary, and it just absolutely, you're in the hands of a master. You're just looked after throughout that film, and you haven't seen anything quite like it. The thing he's brilliant at is you think, I've seen things like this before, but I haven't seen this, and that's such an extraordinary skill to have.
All the studios in Hollywood, when that became a TV movie, were just like, sorry, who is this guy? Who's this young sort of just out of student person that's made this for TV? And yes, he didn't struggle to get work after that.
But exactly, it's interesting sometimes. You get it with songwriters, you get it with musicians, you get it with actors sometimes, where they just turn up and everybody all at the same time goes, yes, that's the thing. That's the thing that we are after. That's the thing that people struggle a lifetime to do, and just straight out of the blocks, which doesn't negate the hard work he puts in and the incredible hours he puts in, but right from the start he had that vision,
it's undisputable, incredible talent
that Hollywood loved, but most importantly viewers absolutely loved as well. Viewers just like, this is, so it's a great piece of cinema, but also it's an entertainment. So I've gone Duel for my number 3.
For number 2, again, it's so hard. E.T.
Yeah.
E.T.
Yeah.
It is so extraordinary to be able. He's so good with making films with children and using children in that way, and it's such an extraordinary story, and it's so beautifully told. And it is totally heartbreaking. God, I remember being in the cinema. We watched this in the cinema, me and my sisters and my mother. And one of my sisters was sitting next to my mother, and she had her arm around her. And halfway through, Lorna said, "Mummy, why is my hair wet?" It's because my mother had been just crying onto her head. Anyway, E.T. is my number 2.
I remember watching that's the first ever pirate video I ever saw when I was a kid,
Wow.
because we didn't have VHSs when I was a kid. I'm so old. And the Witchells who lived opposite us, they got like a video recorder. So this had been whatever year E.T. came out, early 80s. And they were the talk of our road, that they had this thing, and then suddenly there was this bootleg version of E.T. So the first time I watched it, I didn't get the full cinematic scale, but I had the utter awe of being able to watch like a major Hollywood movie illegally on a television. So in a way, it gave me as much happiness as watching on a huge IMAX. But yeah, he again, just a story. You think, yeah, but it's quite simple, this one, Stephen, isn't it? This story, and but what are the moving parts here? But just every single shot and every single emotion, just pitch perfect. Shall I do my number 1?
Okay.
Because we've spoken about it already. My number 1. Oh no, I've got to do my number 2. So if you know what I mean. That's a little glimpse into the producer's mind there. Raiders of the Lost Ark has to be my number 2. Just, it's a film that it never stops. Every time there's like a breath, like something else incredible happens. It's just absolutely
well, it's
non-stop
my
from
number
start to
1,
finish.
so I can chime in at this
Great,
point.
chime in.
It's
Please chime in.
my
Yeah.
number 1.
Yeah.
I have to put it because it's the one I probably, even though there are all his films I rewatch a lot, but I rewatch that most. The character is obviously extraordinary. There's actually some really amazing. I'm going to try and find them. These script meeting notes between George Lucas and Steven Spielberg for Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's a story conference, and you can find them online. I'll try and find them. We'll put them in the show notes because they are. Oh my God, you've got such pleasure coming to you if you haven't read those. You just think, wow, this is some people really think. When you see some absolute sort of rubbish, I'm not even going to mention some of the directors I can't stand, but you know who they are. And you watch something like this and you think, this is like a different species. It is so extraordinary. It's amazing. The character is one of the greatest characters of all time. The direction, everything about it, the adventure, the thrill. It's just so many of the shots when you first see the hat. All of it is iconic, and I have to put it at number 1 because it's the one I rewatch most frequently.
And it really holds up as well.
Oh yeah,
it really holds up. By the way, I said we should do some one-offs where we talk about some of our favourite films, because that's the thing about the production notes. Behind so many films, there are amazing books and stuff that we can talk through. So maybe we'll do
horrifying amount of which I will have read.
But maybe
my only specialist subject.
Maybe we'll do a series on some of our favourite films, and we can just do lots of facts behind it. We'll do like a watch-along type.
I would love that.
That'd be a fun thing to do.
All right, hit me with your number 1 then.
My number 1 is something else we should do a watch-along of. It's your number 3. It's Jaws. I mean, how...
It was hard to put them in any order.
How can you not? Again, something that visually is so arresting. And you think, yeah, but loads of people have done movies about sharks and movies on the sea and movies about small towns. You think, yeah, but none of them looked like that.
No.
None of them had this sort of absolute clarity of vision. And Spielberg is incredibly good at, if he's got a story, literally, and if you were writing films or making films, whatever it is, nothing gets in the way of the story. Nothing gets in the way of your enjoyment of that film. There is nothing where you kind of go, oh, maybe just lose that bit, maybe lose that line, maybe just lose that scene because actually we want to get on with the action. Everything is in the service of the character and the action at the same time. And the look of it is extraordinary. And it's just... if you want to think about scares in cinema, and if you want to think about how cinema is used, and some of those moments in Jaws where you just think, well, that's the template for so much that came after. And Spielberg, by the way, would be the first person to say, oh no, but I was working on templates of other directors from many, many years ago. And of course he was. But you have to at some point go, there's a pantheon of cinema moments.
But he was also working on the fly because, as we discussed before, the shark was such a problem and it doesn't work. So much of that film you were going to see a lot more of the shark. And in the end, you see very little of it. And it's all point of view, the shark, which makes it so, I mean, that all of those shots from above and someone in the water. My mother told me that summer, you didn't matter where you were, people did not want to go in the sea.
No, of course.
She said it was, people talk about, so do I. I still think about it. It's like, you're in Cornwall, don't worry.
Yeah, because when people are doing open water swimming, you go, there's a little movie I'd like to tell you about. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Jaws. So maybe you shouldn't do that. Listen, there's worse things in our sea. But it's also an object lesson to anyone who's writing anything, or anything that sometimes your biggest problems are your biggest solutions, because the fact that they couldn't make the shark work made them go, oh, we're just going to hint at the shark. And the hint at the shark is the thing that makes the movie. And it's always the case in pretty much any work that you do anywhere. The thing you think, oh, there's no way of fixing this. The thing, your workaround is the thing where people go, "Oh, I hadn't seen that before."
Yeah.
And you think, yeah, because no one had to solve that specific problem before.
For a long time, they had the shark at the Universal Studios tour, right back in the sort of 80s when people used to go and do the Universal Studios tour. And people used to laugh when the boat goes past and the shark comes out of the water. And it was a sort of comic piece because when you saw it, you're like, oh, it looks crap.
Yeah.
But there's that great photo. Have you ever seen that great photo of Spielberg like reclining in the jaws of the shark while they're on set? He's in the water, but he's in the shark's teeth, reclining. I'll try and put that on the newsletter as well because it's fun.
But isn't there the thing I was talking to, because we're making Thursday Murder Club with Amblin, and they were saying their offices, which are on the lot, I think they're opposite. Maybe it's the Jaws exhibit. They're opposite one of the exhibits that everybody looks at, just so nobody looks at them.
Yeah,
so literally, they're absolutely they're completely no tourist ever looks their way because they're opposite. I think it might be the Jaws thing. It's certainly something. By the way, anybody, because we should do a thing about movies or TV shows that we absolutely love and just do a deep dive on it. So if you have any suggestions, maybe we'll put together like a little list, a little hit list of things we could talk about. That'd be fun. That's a great question, Max Spiegelberger. Here's a question for you then from Shell Doley. Shell asks, during the filming of The Shining, Danny Lloyd was under the impression, he's the little kid, Danny Lloyd was under the impression he was filming a drama movie to protect him from the scarier elements of the movie he was actually making. I'm wondering how horror or particularly intense films are made when working with child actors. Are they filmed in a certain way to hide the scarier or more dramatic elements of a film?
Ah, yes. Well, Shell, because as you know, children are often in horror films. They somehow make it matter more, or they can be quite creepy themselves.
Yeah, they certainly
it's
can.
They're either in it for one or the other reasons. And in The Shining, you've got both types of child.
Yeah.
You've got, oh dear, this poor innocent child, and then you've got things like the twins. Now,
yeah, and anyone with two kids, by the way, has both those types of child.
Yes, sometimes in the same child, sometimes at different times. Now. Yes, that's what they did do with Danny Lloyd. And the twins, the two girls, now they have to be in the two girls in The Shining, the twin girls, they are in a horrible scene where there's lots of blood and death. But what happened there, I think, was that the props department, they gave them they showed them the fake blood and they gave them the blood to take home. And I think they talked about it afterwards as a sort of fun experience because it's almost, you try and make it a bit like Halloween. Often what they do is they'll show you the rig if it's a stunt or something like that, and the children are always fascinated and things like that. I have to say that my middle son accidentally, I don't know quite how this happened, watched it when he shouldn't have watched it.
This sounds like a subtweet to your husband.
No, it's not. I think it's probably my fault. Anyway, I don't quite know how this happened. Anyway, he watched it and he was terrified of Pennywise the clown. And one night he said it to me at bedtime and I thought, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And then I suddenly remembered, had I not seen some pat pictures on set of Pennywise? And he was up. He was stuck on the zip wire. Much less terrifying than when Boris Johnson was stuck on the zip wire anyway. But Pennywise, and there was some pat pictures that had been on Mail Online or something, where Pennywise was sort of laughing. The guy, I can't remember who played him, but he was laughing up on the rig because he'd got sort of stuck. And then you could see Pennywise having a sandwich and a cup of tea, while they were sort of resorting it all out. Once I showed that to him, my son, he never minded about it whatsoever again. It was that exact scene that he'd been terrified by, where Pennywise kind of scoots down into a park from the sky, and so if you're a child, a playground really, and so he was terrified, and that made it all right.
I think that's why when I was a kid, I used to Tales of the Unexpected used to terrify me, and I'd watched one accidentally. And it's still, to this day, the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life. And if ever I was upstairs and I wasn't asleep and I could hear downstairs my mum watching Tales of the Unexpected and that music started, it would...
It's Pavlovian.
Yeah, they re-show Tales of the Unexpected on Sky Arts.
Oh, do they?
Yes, in the mornings on weekends. Absolutely brilliant. But even now, when that music starts, I have to just calm myself. But I've always done the thing of... I saw the filming of a film on telly and saw the clapperboard. And so I always just, if ever I was watching Scary, imagined the clapperboard going at the beginning and the end and imagining the cameras where they are as well. And that makes things less scary to me.
And that's one of the ways they do. But also, do remember that actually, I'll tell you who had a bad time. Linda Blair in The Exorcist, she had a terrible time because although she says, I knew nothing about what I was doing, I didn't understand why I was stabbing this thing with a cross. I didn't understand any of that. And I honestly didn't get it and it didn't matter to me. But she was physically very harmed in that because they had to put her in a harness when she coming off the bed. And she got a spinal fracture, a lower spinal fracture from that, which you obviously, well, crazy Billy Friedkin, the director, you don't really, that doesn't really happen very much now. But another thing you have to say that happens really mostly in these things is that you often will not see the child in the same frame as the horror. And very often they will not have been even on set where the horrible bit that they're even looking at is shot. They are not actually, if you watch how it's cut, you don't see them all together. They're not in the same frame and you realise that they haven't been involved in it at all. So they are very careful. And obviously, compared to when Linda Blair was in The Exorcist, there are now a number of different things you have to do to protect children, and they are very well protected on set. But generally, that thing of like showing you how it works, if they have to be in the same frame as something where it was unavoidable in The Shining with those two girls, they have to be. I tell you what, a really dark one is Jodie Foster, when she was in Taxi Driver, she played a child prostitute. She was 12. By the way, she had made way more movies than Martin Scorsese and Robert De Niro at that time.
Amazing.
Martin Scorsese apparently used to just giggle and would try and say, can you open his flies? And then would have to walk away because he just found the whole thing so excruciating. She says she's she's extraordinary, isn't she? She says she sort of she's by far the most experienced person on set in terms of being in films. So she sort of took over and got on with it, but they were sort of both unable to deal with it. That's pretty grim. You can't really get past that in that role.
Yes, yeah.
Whether or not you'd really be allowed to do that role now, I'm not even sure.
Yeah, the horror thing is interesting there because you think about so many of the things that terrify us about horror movies, jump scares and things like that, faces in mirrors are not on the set. I mean, literally,
sorry, it's all done in post.
It's
all
not
of that.
Yeah, it's not in the shot. The child is not in a scene. The child is not watching the film. The child is in one camera
Jaws
angle.
is a lot less scary without the music. It's all of these things that are layered on afterwards that make the experience, as you say, much more terrifying. But on set, you can keep it all right.
Yeah, but it's that interesting thing of there's lots of artists and stuff who say, my kids can't watch any of my films yet. And when their kids get a bit older and they can suddenly show them stuff, it's a nice moment. But yeah, there'll be lots of kids who have never seen the film that they're in until they get a little bit older.
This episode is brought to you by Sky. Sky is home to some of the very best shows, including, and we're very excited about this, the brand new season of House of the Dragon.
That's right. Season 2, House of the Dragon, is streaming right now on Sky. You're an enormous fan, aren't you?
I am an enormous fan. And if you're not already an enormous fan, you can catch up with the first season. But the new one has just dropped and the hype is justified. The first episode is brilliant. Can't wait to see more of what's going to happen. Now everyone's at war. And more shocking twists and turns.
There's a lot of dragon action in this.
There's a huge amount of dragons. There's going to be 5 new dragons.
The clue's in the name, right?
Yeah. House of many dragons, but actual real name of the show, House of the Dragon.
Best dragon?
Best dragon. There's a massive one that hasn't been claimed yet called Vermithor. That's huge.
Vermithor.
That's a very powerful dragon. There's a little one called Moondancer.
House of the Dragon is available now exclusively on Sky.
Go to sky.com to find out more. Richard, here is one for you. Dr. Dan. Is that his son? If he feels like a TV doctor is asking you this question.
What if that's Dan Smith and he's finally seen the error of his ways? He goes, I'll get you now.
Oh, I did 2 questions, but I put the wrong name on each one.
Dr. Dan.
I should have done that for the Spielberg top 3. Anyway, Dr. Dan has got this question on, says, having just heard Richard declare his devotion to family fortunes, it made me reflect on TV titles in other countries. In Australia, our equivalent to Family Fortunes is Family Feud, which I believe is also the case in the US. I'm wondering if you can provide other examples of names of TV programs that differ and shine a light on why producers might change for different audiences.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, TV is certainly, 15 years ago in the absolute height of the TV format business, there was a real concentration on having exactly the same title in every single territory. So when Who Wants to Be a Millionaire went around the world, it tended to keep exactly the same title everywhere. Also, by the way, the same theme music, the same graphics, the same set. Most of the countries would have like a ginger woman hosting it. I mean, it
Really?
really went
Why
down
was
to.
that the peak of formats?
It was the peak of formats
Sorry,
because
just sidebar.
yes, because it was the peak of linear TV,
Yeah.
and there was lots of advertising money sloshing around, and everyone needed to fill their schedules, and formats were such an in America when it had always been scripted, and suddenly you got this big non-scripted stuff coming in. So there were just lots of markets that were very, very open to big new unscripted television shows.
Thank you.
And so Big Brother, Millionaire, and Weakest Link all happened at roughly the same time as each other, and all went around the world, all with the same name, by the way. Now, that's one way of doing things. So Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, it's if you don't know the song, you understand the expression. It's not, by the way, and there were versions of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire where there was not a million up for grabs. So but people just kept that title, and people understood it. Weakest Link, the same. People always, even if you don't have that expression in your country, you kind of get it. Deal or No Deal, when we did it, and as I say, it came from a Dutch lottery show, and Deal or No Deal doesn't mean anything in the UK.
No.
Or it didn't, because that was pre-Brexit when suddenly everything was Deal or No Deal. But people sort of understood what it meant, and it's kind of, and so that's called Deal or No Deal pretty much everywhere around the world. And that is, if you've got a piece of IP and you've got something you protect, it's nice to have that brand. Coca-Cola calls itself Coca-Cola everywhere in the world. There's reasons for it, and the graphic identity is the same. Certain shows that have gone around the world, you do have to change. So Strictly Come Dancing would be a really good example of that. So Strictly Come Dancing, huge on the BBC, that goes around the world as well. Now, that title literally makes no sense to anybody. If you've never watched, so it comes from the fact that we used to have Come Dancing, used to be the BBC show, and it came out a few years after Strictly Ballroom, right, the Australian movie about ballroom dancing. And so it became Strictly Come Dancing. But
it is so idiosyncratic that it couldn't possibly.
Yeah, you could try and get away with it, but certainly in America, they would say, "Look, this isn't." I mean,
when it went to ABC, and they were like, "Tell me what the exact show is in the title."
Yeah, exactly. So over there, it's called Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah,
right, which is perfect. It's it's probably a better name than Strictly Come Dancing, but Strictly works beautifully over here. But in other countries, they can call that other things. It literally doesn't translate. So Pointless, but it doesn't translate to other countries because Pointless is a pun. Yeah. Which is no points, but also it's sort of a slightly quirky kind of underdog British title. So everywhere around the world, that's called like Nilgepunkt and things like that. So it's always called different things because if you've got any sort of pun, it doesn't quite fit the bill. So Family Feud, that was an American show, and you bring it over, and in the UK, you kind of think, Feud doesn't suit our personality type, whereas if we call it Family Fortunes, we keep that lovely.
We never argue. It does now.
But the trouble is we do argue, and so it's like, should we not remind ourselves of that?
Yeah.
So it had that thing in the 70s and 80s in British TV of being slightly more aspirational. A different version of that would be Strike It Lucky, the Barrymore show, which in America was called Strike It Rich.
Yeah.
And we got to the point in our culture then where we go, I think it came out, during the era of Thatcherism, where we're like, maybe Strike It Rich might be a bit on the nose for our times, so we call it Strike It Lucky over here. So again, it's these little kind of cultural things that come about. Some shows you have to rename. University Challenge is College Bowl in the States, and firstly, we don't know what a college is. We know what a university is, and we don't know what a bowl is.
No,
because like Super Bowl or things like that, we don't understand that that's a competition. So if we call that College Bowl over here, that would essentially be like calling Strictly Come Dancing in America. It would make absolutely no sense at all. So by and large, you will try and protect the name of your show, and you'll try and have the brand go around the world, but there are moments where you just think this is just not going to work in our territory. And if you have a show that's a real roller coaster, like Millionaire, like Weakest Link, you can call it whatever you want. So you can say to the Americans, you can have it, but you have to call it this. Yeah. If you've got shows that they're just picking up off the shelf, a few years later, then it's harder. Traitors, which has gone around the world, the most recent show really to have gone around the world, that's a pretty simple translation into pretty much any country. So that's called The Traitors pretty much everywhere. But so sometimes it's just the power of the brand that you already have, so you can impose it on people. But sometimes it's you cannot call Strictly Come Dancing in America, because it's, where do you even begin with that? So it's a great question. And so House of Games, by the way, is called Richard Osman's House of Games because there is a show called House of Games in America. So we weren't allowed to call it that. So we had to put my name in the title. But obviously, if we went abroad with that, we would not call it Richard Osman's House of Games, although I would like it.
Yeah.
If I go to Slovenia and watch Richard Osman's House of Games hosted by someone else.
Well, looky like you. Some kind of the equivalent of the Ginger Woman.
They do that on Pointless. You watch Pointless in some countries in the world. They literally have a guy wearing glasses at the laptop. And you just think, okay,
wow.
Listen, I kind of see it. I mean, I'm more than that.
Yeah.
I'm more than a pair of glasses. But
Has he written any books? No.
Yeah, no. They also then legally have to write murder mysteries as well. Yeah. Otherwise they get fired. So yeah, lots of different reasons. But if you can keep your title, then it makes business sense. But there's sometimes you just can't. Marina, this is a perfect question for you, given the show that you've recently been making. Christian Mahn asks, I see hot off the heels of Harrison Ford, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, there is now a movie with a de-aged Tom Hanks in production. Is this latest foray into unrealistic plastic fantastic fakeness down to your point made previously that there are no more leading men under 40 except Timothy Chalamet?
Right. That is the movie here that stars Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, and it's interesting. That one I feel is different. It's directed by Robert Zemeckis.
I cannot wait for this film.
I can't wait for it either. It's got one fixed camera position, and you're going to see them through all. You can see the trailer now. You're going to see them through a whole as they age. I feel that, in fairness, definitely. I mean, I haven't seen the film yet, and it's pretty sure. I'm sure it'll be great, but we'll have to see. But Robert Zemeckis has been interested in aging. If you think he's always been interested in aging and how people change in place and time. If you look at the Back to the Future trilogy, you look at Forrest Gump, he's interested in that anyway. So I'm going to throw him a bone, as it were. Not that he needs one.
And it's based on a comic book as well, which it's just a very, very clever device of the camera is the thing that stays still and people move through the camera, even back to like prehistoric times. If you see the trailer, it's the same fixed shot, so you couldn't do it without some sort of device whereby you have the de-aging.
You have to do it there. Otherwise, we have seen it creeping up much more. There were a few. It was in things like Benjamin Button and things like that you'd have to obviously have it. But then suddenly in 2019, I think it is, there are lots of them. It happens with the Samuel L. Jackson in a Marvel one. Obviously, it happened with Harrison Ford. I'm of the view that it's one of those ones that some of these are, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. I mean, I particularly like the fact that, imagine if they just de-aged Marlon Brando for Godfather Part 2. That would have, it's not as good as Robert De Niro. The restrictions with which people had to work with in the old days have often given rise to much better things like that. I mean, I'm trying to think of another one. River Phoenix as a young Indiana Jones, rather than having to sort of de-age him in The Last Crusade. But yes, and so I those ones. But now you see Scorsese has you're seeing De Niro de-age. I mean, Marlon Brando, if you'd had the technology, you'd have had to do it every time he turned up on set by the end, because he turns up on set for Apocalypse Now, and he's enormous, and they're thinking, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? I mean, actually, and another great film. I mean, not a great film, but another absolute cult classic, Dr. Moreau, which I strongly advise anyone. Have a look at that, and then there's a wonderful and then there's a wonderful documentary about the making of it. But Brando, when you turned up, you would have had to do it. In the end, what Coppola has to do, again, necessity, he has to put him so deeply in the shadows in Apocalypse Now. And those incredible shots you get of him sort of looming out of the darkness, which seem to be, of course, all of this was planned because of the nature of the book and the novel, the Joseph Conrad novel, Heart of Darkness. You know, it all seems right, but a lot of that came from necessity. So, but in general, this de-aging thing, I don't know, it seems to me that it's more part of nostalgia, and people are doing it because of nostalgia, and nostalgia is a huge thing. Do you know that in the late 17th century, nostalgia, they thought it was a disease you could be cured of. It was named after Swiss mercenaries who were fighting for all the various different powers in Europe, and they thought you could be cured of it. Wow. And that you could, usual things, leeches and the usual, hot compresses, that sort of thing. But now we think that you make so much money out of it that no one wants to cure anybody of it. But in terms of your question, sorry, going back to it, these old movie stars, they can open the movies still. And even when you're going to see Gladiator II later this year, you'll see that the official trailer, they've had a sort of first look thing, but when the official trailer comes, you're going to see a lot of Denzel Washington in that, because Denzel Washington, people say, oh, Paul Mescal, but the people who like Paul Mescal don't, as a rule, genuinely, definitely get themselves up and go out to the cinema. I think they will, by the way. I think you'll come for Denzel Washington and you'll stay for Paul Mescal. But you'll see a lot of Denzel Washington in that trailer, because people get up and will go and watch Denzel, and the people who...
And is he de-aged in that? Is he?
No, he's not. But that's relating to the part of the question. It's like, is this because we can't find any leading young men under that certain age? You will find them, but they will also use other people to get in. In terms of the technology, I actually think that the workarounds that they had to do in the old days were, in general, better. Sometimes, in the case perhaps of this Zemeckis film here, which we'll have to see, it seems to me like there's no other possible way you could do it.
It's the only way to do it. He's not going, I'm making this film and I'd like a young Tom Hanks in it. He's saying, I'm making this film with Tom Hanks and I have to have Tom Hanks at a series of different ages.
And it's one of the great themes and tropes of his work as a director. So I'm interested.
But it is definitively... we're going to get more and more and more and more de-aged actors in movies, because, I mean, why wouldn't we? We can do it. And by the way, we've talked before, we're going to get to the point where you are going to be in movies because the AI is going to be good enough that we take an image of you and suddenly you're going to be in Back to the Future. Oh,
yes. Sorry, that was a little thing that we talked about Delebs before, the Book of the Dead, the dead celebrities and how they make money. Now, an AI firm, only this past week has brought up the voices of Laurence Olivier, Judy Garland, James Dean, and I think like Burt Reynolds, who are going to read audiobooks. And Liza Minnelli's like, I'm so happy that to see my mother's voice available to the countless millions of people who love her. I can't help feeling she might be thinking of some other countless millions, but anyhow, this is a thing. This is real. This is happening with the permission of these estates. The Delebs are on the march in terms of AI and reading, and they're going to do audiobooks.
I mean,
that's one of the first things you're going to see. I mean, it makes sense in lots of ways, doesn't it? Imagine Judy Garland doing The Wizard of Oz, reading the book of The Wizard of Oz. You can't knock it.
Yes, I don't know how you're going to, because the great audiobook readers, I mean, there's acting and emotion. We're not just listening to a timbre, a voice, or So I mean, how are they getting the acting?
I don't know. Well, we'll have to see. But the trouble is, everyone's saying, it's irreplicable, all this human stuff. I think we're going to find more and more, as we said so often before, that it's not perhaps, or it's replicable to a level that people are happy with. My children will watch the most awful AI narration on YouTube, and I was saying at the weekend to them, "Can you just turn this off? I can't listen to it." And they're like, "What?" They don't even notice it or hear it. That it's all almost individual. Well, it is. It's individual words that have been taped together to say whatever you want.
Yeah, they say, this is a tennis ball factory.
It's unlistenable to, but not to them.
Denver, in Colorado. And you think, yeah. I think, the next few years are a long, slow process of working out that humankind are not as special as we thought we were.
Yeah.
That's annoying, isn't it?
See you in the catacombs.
Yeah.
All right, Richard.
You know what? That's a great catchphrase for the show. See you in the catacombs, guy. It's all downhill from here.
Yeah.
The rest is catacombs.
Richard, I'm dying to ask you this question. It comes from Matt Stubbs, but also me. What's your
Stubbsy.
favourite? Yeah, Stubbsy says, what are your absolute favourite top 3 shows that everyone else seems to have forgotten?
Oh, gosh, that's a good one. Well, it's interesting that, because it's the first one I would talk about is I saw The Traitors is up for like a BAFTA for most original show.
Yeah.
And 10, 15 years ago, we were all trying to pitch a version of it, because we all played that Wink Murder or Mafia or whatever you want to call it, or Werewolf. So everyone played it. And so the BBC tea time version of Traitors, which was on about 10, 15 years ago, hosted by Tony Livesey. So the BBC have had a series of this before. They literally did it as a tea time show, but they play it out in half-hour episodes. And at the time, I thought, I love this show. It's really, really good. It ran for one series, and everyone's like, that's never going to work. And then became the biggest show in the world. So if you can find an episode on YouTube, Traitors. There's a great, I mean, there's so many brilliant comedy dramas right at the moment that they really slip through the net. The one that I absolutely love, there's 2 seasons of it now, but it didn't seem to trouble the scorers here, is Upright, which is Tim Minchin.
Yep. Tim
Minchin, and sort of taking upright piano across Australia for reasons that the plot will lead you into. And that's a show, I just think it's so brilliant. and it's like half hours, and it's got a really great British sensibility. There's no barriers to British people loving that show, and Tim Minchin is great in it, and the rest of the cast is amazing as well. And it's one of those things in this golden age of scripted television. There are just so many shows that have just slipped through the net, just brilliant bits of television that are lost forever, but upright.
I'm not sure they will be. I think we'll be watching in this whole new era with ad tiers and everyone licensing everyone else's content. I think all of this stuff that they made during this period, they will go back and reshow, slightly like the Suits phenomenon, but they'll reshow all this stuff because they simply can't afford to make anywhere like as many of them, and everybody missed so much of it.
And a great show is a great show is a great show and remains one. But that I would really, really recommend. I'll do one of my own ones because, by and large, your shows get what they deserve in this world. And we live in an industry where people go, oh, we were so unlucky with that show because if only they'd put it at 8 p.m. instead of 8:30, or if only, and by and large, the viewers know what's good and what's not good. And we did a show called International King of Sports on Channel 5, and there's still some footage of it. We filmed it down in Cheltenham, and it was a series. We made up loads of sports, essentially, like under hurdles and things, lots of backwards running and loads of different things, uphill long jump. And we got competitors from all around the world. Listen, spoiler, they were all at like British universities, but so we had Nigeria and Australia and Japan, and they'd all wear the kit of their country.
Were they athletes in any?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's the idea behind the show, is there's loads of people who are unbelievable athletes but haven't quite found the sport.
Yeah.
For them, they did tennis and they did rugby, but they didn't quite find the one that they fit. So we invented loads of new sport, and it had world records and stuff like that. And we pretended it was like the 50th annual version of International King of Sports. So we had loads of records, and we had Alan Parry commentated on it, and we filmed it in stadiums and what have you. That was a show that I loved. I'd love to remake it for Netflix with like a multi-billion-dollar budget, but one of those shows
that would be very good.
Yeah, it'd be, and it was just like one of those shows that was just an absolute joy. And you do think, by and large, every show I've ever done has got its just desserts. Some have been more successful than they should have been, but International King of Sports was the one that I think, that's the one. That's the one. You can
see with the casting how it could be so amazing, because there's backstories in that way that during the Olympics, which we're everyone is about to get incredibly into the stories of athletes they've never heard of before.
Exactly.
You are all about to become obsessed and moved and transported by people who you've never heard of before, and in sports that by and large you have zero interest in at any other time of the year.
Yeah, and also you'll flick on to like the quarterfinals of the 110 metres hurdle, so you go, I'm not interested, and then suddenly you see in lane 3 there's a Brit, so you go, okay, I'll watch this one. I will watch this bit, if you've got something at stake.
And then the VT packages will tell you about their family and what they've sacrificed to get there, and you're like, oh my God, I can't deal with this anymore. I'm just clear my schedule. I'm watching every single hurdling event for the rest of this game.
And by the way, this was still in an era where you get away with calling a show International King of Sports, and it was all men, which you definitively wouldn't do now. It'd be International Champion of Sports, and it'd be much more interesting for it. But it was of its time. It very much did not have a live audience in it, and you can really tell. But it was an awful lot of fun. Final question for you, Marina. This I'm asking you this because of the show you've just been working on.
Yep.
Emma Godber asks, I have always wondered what happens when the plot calls for another fictional show to be filmed. Do they use prop cameras, lighting and actors to act as the team, or do they use the crew that is already there filming the actual show but add some extra cameras?
Aha. Okay. Well, I can speak about the show specifically that I have, which is not aired, but it has finished being shooting.
Are you allowed to say what it's called, by the way?
Yes, it's called The Franchise,
yes.
And you will be able to watch it on HBO or Now or Sky or wherever you get HBO shows like Succession or House of the Dragon. Yes, it's all backstage on, I'm not giving anything away to say, it's all backstage on a franchise film. And we had an entirely separate fake crew, entirely separate props, everything. I will only say that on day one, when we got there to shoot the pilot, it was such a head scramble. It was so confusing. You couldn't tell because they looked so like that person might look in the crew. And you've got a very, very big crew on a show like that. And therefore, you also have a very big crew on a big superhero franchise movie, so you need to have a very big crew of supporting actors who are all those people. It was such a head scramble. I honestly, you were constantly, you actually worked out eventually that people had yellow lanyards and black lanyards for real and not real.
Like Inception, with the spinning top.
Yeah, exactly. But I couldn't get my head around it. I was thinking, is that part of the set, or is that our tent that the writers sit in, or is that where the writers in the thingy would sit? And you couldn't work it out. And actually, people were told, like, don't touch that. You've got a drink of water from the water. It was like, no, that's for continuity. You can't touch that as part of the set. And so we were in such a muddle throughout. And even right by the end, we were still saying to people, can I just, who you thought were on the crew, and they'd be like, I'm not on the crew. They're just playing someone on the crew. It was so confusing all the way through. But in order to keep the realism, we had to have all of that. Yeah, and totally separate cameras, totally separate everything. And, real trailers for the actors and real, the whole thing was almost like a double of everything.
That's amazing. Yeah,
it was fascinating to look at.
Yeah, but essentially, if you're ever seeing a camera or a camera operator on a film, then
they
is
are
an actor.
always an actor.
Yeah.
They're always and people don't want, they really wouldn't want, they're too busy anyway, the people who are doing those jobs. They certainly wouldn't want to be sort of asked, do you don't mind mucking in, do you?
Yeah.
But
never ask your crew to muck in.
No,
go,
they are already mucking in.
You can pay me to muck in if you want to, but yeah, let's you muck in all you like. I'm doing a job of work.
Yes, absolutely. So and they are very, very busy. So it will always be, as on that show, an entirely separate crew of people.
Oh my God, that literally must have. That's so because the one thing on any sort of set is where can I walk? Where is safe? Where is safe for me to walk? Am I in front of the camera? Am I behind the camera here? And
it was completely impossible the whole way through. It was so sort of funny and interesting, and we were still getting it wrong, thinking that they were the real
I would
people.
literally have sat in the same chair throughout and not moved.
Sit where
for like 6
I'm told.
weeks.
Yeah,
exactly. That's us done, I think, for another week.
I think it is. Oh, and don't forget, you can sign up to the newsletter, of which I've touted various things this week, at therestisentertainment.com.
Lovely. See you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday.